welcome to the next episode of Pharmacy Frontiers podcast. I've got a rock star on today, Ron Fitzwater, and I appreciate you being here, Ron. I just want to take care of a few housekeeping things. Unfortunately, Daniel's out on assignment today, doing something for Mercy or wherever he works, and the man is always on the go. So I'm not sure where he's at, but I wish the best for him. We're coming up on the holiday season and just hoping everybody's staying warm. It's getting cold outside. But I just want to remind everybody that this is the Pharmacy Frontiers podcast. It's presented by Missouri Pharmacy Association, and the opinions that we express and talk about on this podcast are our own and not necessarily representative of Missouri Pharmacy Association or Mitchell's Drugstores or Mercy. So just to let you know, we're moving into the new year. We're going to have some new topics. I've asked Ron to come on today to kind of talk a little bit about him, so people can kind of understand who he is. And he is the CEO of the Missouri Pharmacy Association. Been a good friend of mine for many, many years. Learned a lot from Ron, and I just wanted to have you on to have a good discussion today. So, Ron, welcome. I'm glad you're here. If you'd like to, what I'd like for you to do maybe is just kind of introduce yourself to someone that may have never met you. Kind of talk a little bit briefly about your kind of where you started through your career and where you are today. So, all right.
Well, thanks. It's indeed a privilege to be with you. I know you and Daniel have spent a lot of time on this podcast, and we very much appreciate it. It's the wave of the future, the wave of the current of how you communicate. So we appreciate the work that you've done. I've had the privilege of working here for the Missouri Pharmacy Association since June of 2002. But my career dates back prior to that. I've actually got an accounting background. I went to Kent State University in Ohio, not far from where I grew up in Northeast Ohio. Upon graduating from there, went to Florida for a couple of years and then came back to Cleveland to begin work in associations. First at the Academy of Medicine of Cleveland, which was an association that represented physicians in the Cleveland metropolitan area. I came in as the director of finance there, so kind of putting my accounting background to work. Spent 4 years working for the Academy of Medicine. I thoroughly enjoyed it. I was very fortunate to have a boss that allowed me to explore a lot of different activities. So if a new committee would come available or a challenge would come up, I would try to volunteer for it. And he was very generous to allow me to wade into probably some areas that I wasn't quite ready for, but it was a good on the spot learning opportunity. He was a tough boss. He asked tough questions, and he really gave me a good grounding in associations and how to work with members and how to address issues. And more importantly, I got my first exposure on the advocacy side, the policy side, and that's what I really enjoyed. While I was there in Cleveland, I was able to get my MBA, and then shortly after getting that, had the opportunity to go to Orlando, Florida, and run the County Medical Association there, and we were there about 11 years. Went there as the CEO of that organization, so went from a director position to the CEO, obviously of at the time, a smaller association, but the opportunity to really grow and work in Orlando as that what was a sleepy little town with the House of the Mouse out on the southwest side of town to a thriving metropolis now, and just watching the growth over the time we were there, and it's doubled or tripled since we left. But it was a great opportunity to begin the process of running an association. We worked very closely with the state medical association, so I spent a lot of time in Tallahassee, and that's really where I got my wings as far as direct one-on-one lobbying and working with the legislature there. The State Medical Association was very open in working with county medical associations. So we had a lot of exposure and worked very closely, and spent a lot of time in Tallahassee and working on legislative issues. From there, I had an opportunity to go back to Ohio to a much larger association in Columbus. And we spent 4 years there at the County Medical Association, but we also had a very large healthcare foundation. We had at the time I got there, it was about a $40 million foundation. It had grown into about a $74 million foundation when I left. We were very actively engaged working with United Way and many other funders in that area on anti-tobacco programs and some very creative things in Central Ohio. And then from there, went to South Carolina, went to a state association. So that was my first exposure in a state association. Went there as the chief operating officer, so the number 2 person. And again, I had a great boss that gave me a lot of flexibility in my role. I spent a lot of time at the Capitol and Columbia, so kind of continuing that work in the legislative side. We also had a very large political action committee and worked very closely with the AMA's political action committee. So we were very focused, very engaged with the legislative delegation and the congressional delegation. And then got my premier job in June of 2002. I had an opportunity to come over here and interview for the position as the CEO of the Missouri Pharmacy Association. And I think maybe caught some folks by surprise. I mean, I think they had pretty well settled that they were going to hire another pharmacist. I followed George A. Strike. He left very big shoes to fill. Pharmacist, sure. Very creative, and did a great job for Missouri Pharmacy. But we connected in the interview, and they decided to give this non-pharmacist an opportunity, and I appreciate that. It's just
so that was
to work for pharmacists.
Yeah. So now that search committee, it was Mike Stevens, and I know Mike always tells the story every time I talk to him. When we have the president's breakfast at the MPA annual every year, about how he came across you, and Mike Stevens, Randy Mintz, who was some others?
Yeah, Randy, Jim Harlan was on
Harlan,
there.
Yeah.
There were a number. Charlia Leatherwood, Kathy Brown was involved.
Big names in pharmacy for sure.
Yeah, they were a tough group, and I came into it. I think they had already decided on a candidate out of Kansas that come out of the Medicaid program, but they had already set up an interview with me, and Mike felt guilty about calling me and saying, "Hey, you don't have to worry about coming from South Carolina out to Missouri." But so I came out and we sat down, and the interview lasted much longer than they anticipated. Then they invited me to go to lunch with them. I thought, well, maybe that's a good sign. We had a good conversation. But yes, Mike is always very generous, and we have past presidents who very well that are tired of hearing that story, but he tells it, and
I love hearing
it.
I love hearing it. I think
he's a great guy. We're going to miss him in the legislature.
Yeah, absolutely. You got it for sure. So, CEO of Missouri Pharmacy Association, and I know you I don't know if you get a chance to toot the horn of Missouri Pharmacy Association and the things that they do, why it exists. But for the common everyday individual, if you met someone that didn't know anything about Missouri Pharmacy Association, what would you tell them about MPA, what it does, what the value is, and just kind of, to convince them to understand more about it?
Well, essentially, it's similar to the message I try to get to students when we have student through here or they come in for legislative day. They come in assuming that they've got their degree from their college and they're ready to go and do what they want to do. But the state of Missouri actually tells them how they can practice. So what the Missouri Pharmacy Association tries to do is to be at every table where healthcare is discussed, and especially pharmacy and the role of pharmacy. So either protecting that role, and I think the work that we had done in the past came to fruition in 2020 when COVID hit. Other healthcare institutions were closing, medical clinics and medical offices were closing, hospitals were closing, at least for elective surgeries. Our pharmacies were open. Now, they may have closed down the front side of the store, but the drive-through windows and curbside and pharmacists were on the job. And what we have tried to say is pharmacy is a critical part of healthcare, and we need to be at the table discussing that. And that's what the Missouri Pharmacy Association tries to do, working with the Missouri Board of Pharmacy, certainly working in the legislature to expand the practice of pharmacy. I mean, you are trained to do a lot of things that you can't do in practice in this state. Some states have broadened it further. Some states aren't as far along as we are, but always trying to work. And I think my time working with physicians, I understand that they are very hesitant about giving up a piece of their practice. So, I mean, we try to work with them and explain. And again, I think COVID gave us the ability to show what pharmacists can do if you take some of the restraints away and allow them to practice and allow you to practice up to your professional levels. And as you well know, I mean, the students coming out now of the pharmacy schools they just keep getting better and better every year, and their abilities in patient care. So we try to create that environment where they can do that. And I think we've had some success. We've got some challenges that we need to continue to push on, but it's just a privilege to work. And we try to make sure that we are places where those discussions are going on.
Absolutely. Well, and I know you're situated, your office there is situated really close to the Capitol. So that makes pretty close access to legislators to be able to get the message of pharmacy to them. You're not far from the Missouri Board of Pharmacy offices, as well as many of the state offices that help govern a lot of the practice of pharmacy. So, I appreciate what MPA does. Where do you see, I mean, do you see some things in the future about the profession as far as like, I know you'd mentioned to try to open up, expand the practice. And I think there's lots more things that are on the horizon coming very soon. Without telling us everything, give us some examples of things that MPA has been working on recently. I know there's a collaboration with MPA supporting CPSN Missouri. Maybe speak a little bit about that if you can, and kind of enlighten us about some of the support that's been provided there.
Well, we've always been blessed to have good leaders, so that has been exciting. I mean, we've got leaders that have been presidents, active in national associations. We've got new leaders coming up through some of the nationals. So we have had pharmacists in the state that understand where pharmacy has been and, more importantly, where it can go. And we're trying to have some of those discussions. One of the exciting things is the new governor, Governor Kehoe, is coming in much like a former governor came in, and we won't discuss him, other than he came in with a mindset that we need to get rid of some of the regulation in the state of Missouri and allow professionals to be able to operate within their licensing. Governor Kehoe has come in with that mindset of trying to look at regulation, and Governor Parson kind of carried on from his predecessor some of that, but over the last few years, it seems like it's kind of taken a back seat. So one of the exciting things that we're going to be talking to our board about, and I'm sure you're aware of what Idaho did a number of years ago, kind of flipping from the old model of a regulatory environment to a more standard of care environment. And we're going to begin those discussions in Missouri to allow pharmacists to have much more control over the way they practice. So that will be obviously a long-term thing. That's not something you just take to the legislature and you're able to implement. And we've got to get the Board of Pharmacy along, because there's going to be things that they're going to be hesitant about as well. But we feel like we've got the legislative leaders in place that might get the message, and if we can begin to move the discussion. So our board, hopefully, we'll take up on that project, and we'll use 2025 as the beginning of that discussion. But again, as I discussed earlier, just trying to look at the practice of pharmacy, and we understand that it's no longer just pills in a bottle. I mean, pharmacy has changed so much. I mean, it's hard to believe, but when I first got here, pharmacists couldn't even do flu shots. I mean, it was done, but it was kind of the board of pharmacy looking the other direction. And we had to actually pass legislation to allow pharmacists to be able to immunize. And, that has expanded some. And, again, during COVID, I mean, I can't even imagine where we'd have been if pharmacists weren't administering those vaccines, because the first places that it was done was in pharmacies.
Absolutely.
James took care of the long-term care facilities, and then the next rollout was to independent pharmacies, and Missouri Pharmacy Association worked with the Department of Health in that rollout. So doing things like that, but then, we've got to move the profession much further into the future. I mean, it's always fascinating to me that, we have pharmacists that work in the VA in Columbia. I mean, they can basically do everything.
Right.
And you don't see the horror stories that we always hear at the Capitol. Oh, if a pharmacist does this, there's going to be negative outcomes. We don't hear that in the VA system. No. And, on the coast in California, Kaiser, they've been able to do some creative things. So it's proof that pharmacists can do those things. You've got to get it through the legislative process. And that's what we attempt to do.
Well, I think that's awesome. And yes, I think 2025 and beyond is going to bring some really interesting things. And it's not a sprint. It's a marathon. I get it totally. So I'm going to switch gears a little bit here. Thank you for the insight there. So you have kind of a second duty as mayor of Jefferson City, which is our capital city. And I'd like for you to kind of tell me a little bit about what it's like to be mayor and why you chose that occupation as I guess a second occupation. I don't know what you call it, but I'm sure you do more than just cut ribbons on new businesses and those types of things. But kind of tell me a little bit about what it's like to be mayor and what you do on a daily basis.
Well, first, I appreciate our board working with me. They were a little hesitant when I first announced that I wanted to run for city council. I mean, I guess I just have the passion for serving and, the legislative side. I saw some gaps in the city. There was an opportunity to run for a council seat. So I took that. I spent 6 years on council. We like state legislature have term limits, so you can run for 4 2-year terms on city council. And then you can also run, the mayor is a 4-year term. You can run for 2 of those. So our mayor was terming out when I finished up my 6th year on council. And, I just felt like that was something that I wanted to pursue. I was fortunate and ended up running unopposed. So, I always joke with people. I don't know if they were afraid of me or no one else wanted the job, but I got elected in April of 23. So I'm a little over a year and a half into it. The exciting thing to me, I'm more of a nuts and bolts. I just want to see things get done. We had a lot of needs, a lot of cans that we had kicked down the road in the city that it was very frustrating. So yeah, I have to go to the ribbon cuttings. I'm going to be involved in some Christmas activities and some things, but what I really like is getting around a table and solving problems for people and moving some issues forward. Where I think it benefits pharmacy, it gives me exposure at the Capitol. I mean, when I walk in there now, legislators, the governor, hey, mayor, how you doing? You're my mayor. Our new governor has lived here for decades. So, I mean, this is home to him now. So he calls me his mayor, which is very nice, but it gives me exposure there that I can then move into pharmacy, because they all know, in addition to being mayor, that I represent pharmacists, and I'm very proud of that and where I can use those leverage points. But I enjoy being mayor. It's been a great opportunity. It gives me exposure to the issues in our community. It has been, trying to juggle 1.5 or 2 full-time jobs. Again, our board has been very generous. I mean, I have not shortchanged the association, but it means I get in the office very early and usually leave when it's dark. But Karen, my wife, has been very supportive. And of course, Travis, our middle son, is in the legislature, so he kind of gets the workload and has been supportive. So it I think has been a net positive for pharmacy, and hopefully the people in the city would say they see some positive changes. So I've enjoyed it. I mean, like I said, I'm in the midst of my second year of a 4-year term, and we'll see where that goes in a couple
Yeah.
of years.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate you sharing that. I know it's definitely an interesting turn, and what you just mentioned there about you're the governor's mayor. That's pretty interesting.
I like to remind him of that. I got to work with the current first lady yesterday on some parking issues
Oh
for an
yeah.
event that's coming up at the mansion. So it's nice to be able to help and for her to feel very open to call me and say, hey, I need some
Need some
assistance.
spaces.
So
Yeah. Yeah.
those
Sure.
things, they remember them. So, I mean, I think it
Absolutely.
works good for everybody.
You bet. You bet. Well, thanks for sharing that. That was a nice little story there. So we're kind of coming toward the end, but I'd like to a couple things I'd like to just mention or throw out at you with the profession, pharmacy profession. I know there's lots of changes, and we mentioned that. And you mentioned you've worked with students. I'd like to kind of have you give kind of your thoughts on what you would tell the next generation of pharmacists if they're listening, because we have a lot of students that listen. What would you tell them about the profession of pharmacy? Because I've had pharmacists or students come in and say, "Well, I've heard community pharmacy's dead." I hate hearing that, but please tell me what you would tell a new pharmacy student that's come into your office about pharmacy.
Well, as you all know, one of our challenges is just getting your colleagues to talk about the positive side of pharmacy, because you're right. Students come in, they're frustrated, and you're proof, and so many of our members that, yeah, there have been a lot of challenges, and it's frustrating to sit here in Jefferson City that we can't just wave the magic wand and fix some of those things. But it's still a pretty good profession. And I try to remind our members, when they get frustrated and, are venting, and, that's appropriate. But I try to ask them, why did you get into pharmacy? And they'll take me back and they say, that hasn't changed.
Right.
I mean, yeah, the reimbursement, the way you practice, those things, but the reason you got in has not changed. I never talked to a pharmacist who say, yeah, I got in because it was a high paying profession. They got in for some patient care. So we tried to get that down to the students, and, hopefully, we've got a new group that's working. It's kind of a coalition of some of the pharmacy groups in the state of Missouri, led by the dean over at St. Louis College of Pharmacy and Dr. Melcher at UMKC, because there's a huge concern about our pharmacy schools and the lack of students wanting to even go into pharmacy. So I think we're trying to take it deeper, and how can we do a better job at the high school level of showing students that this is still an incredible career. You can still have an impact on people's lives. You can still make a good living, but more importantly, you can feel good about what you're doing. So we try to get that message to pharmacy students, and I ask them the same question if they get frustrated. It's like, why did you get into this? Why did you go to pharmacy school? And then it takes them back to, oh yeah, I wasn't really getting into it just for the money. Some maybe. I mean, it is still a fairly good paying career,
Sure.
but most have gotten in for a different reason. You try to refocus them on that. The other thing I try to encourage them is to get involved in as many things as you can, including the associations. Get to know as many people as you can. You go to a lot of national meetings, so you know that pharmacy world is really pretty small when you get down to it. You meet somebody, and maybe 10 years later, 20 years later, you're working with them on a project, or maybe you get a job from them. So try to get to know as many people as you can. And the way you get to know them is to go to state association meetings, legislative day, NCPA, APHA. Get to know people from not only your state, but from other states.
Absolutely.
So get involved. And I get it. Travel is expensive. Time away is expensive. The cost of going to pharmacy school has gone up. So many of them have to work and can't afford to travel as much, but they've got to get entrenched in the profession. And the students that we see that come through here that have done that are having much more fun than those that it's just a grind. And, they've gone through pharmacy school, they've done the minimal as far as the outside working with groups. And then they get out in the profession, they've got no network, they've got no connection points. We offer a rotation site here. We try to get students to come through. If it's during session, they get a little flavor of what it's like at the Capitol. If not, we try to get them to Board of Pharmacy meetings. But there's a lot of things out there, and don't forget that retail is an option. And, that's probably one of the frustrating things from the schools. I'm not sure they get a lot of background in what it's like going into an independent or into another setting. So don't forget there's other options out there other than just what's on the forefront.
I appreciate that. I know when I was a student, we had Charlie Leatherwood actually was one of the ones that came in to my class and talked to us about community pharmacy, and I think Kathy Brown was another. And I was like, wow, these guys are rock stars and I want to be like them. That being said, there's lots of individuals, and I think a lot of that is the responsibility of people like myself throughout the state and whatever area you're in, to be able to try to participate in those types of opportunities. And I'd love to see MPA, like with this coalition, try to get some community pharmacists involved that will actually go and speak. I know Sandra Bollinger and I went and talked to UMKC one time about the Missouri Pharmacist Care Network. Remember when that happened?
Absolutely.
And so here we are now in the middle of that's driving most of the nation in that whole concept there. So we're coming to the end here, and I'm going to throw one more thing out at you. I want you to, if you don't mind, tell the listeners one thing about Ron Fitzwater that not everybody may know. It might be a little interesting thing about Ron Fitzwater. So,
well, I like to see the sign on my phone that says no service. And it usually is because I like to hike. And when I can sneak away, Karen and I love to go out to Colorado. She doesn't hike with me, but I love to hike and just, I love the mountains. I love the ocean, but I love the mountains. I love to hike and just explore this beautiful country. And there's nothing like getting to that place where you see no service and you know that you're totally off the grid and you can just enjoy what's out there. So when I get a chance, I love to go hiking.
Absolutely. Well, I will also just say one more additional thing is my wife and I just recently came back from Sedona, Arizona. I don't know if you've ever been to Sedona, but we were amazed. I mean, we went there last year and did some hiking, and just every time we go, we're just like, this is an incredible place. Just looking at what God created for this lowly individual to go take a look at and feast my eyes on. It's amazing. The sunsets, the sunrises. I totally get what you're saying. In Sedona, you don't really have a place where there's no service on your phone, but there's still a lot of beautiful sites. They have.
Yeah, it's hard to find.
Yeah.
We had a group that we used to work a lot with. It's kind of wound down now, but we usually meet 3 or 4 times a year in Las Vegas, and Las Vegas is not my favorite spot.
No.
We found Red Rock, which is about 20 minutes out of town.
Yeah.
And there's some amazing hikes out of there. So we had a group of about a half a dozen of us that would make sure we tagged that onto our trip, and it made trips to Vegas a lot more fun because
there you go. You got something to
probably 30 minutes is probably my max ever in casinos all added together. So
yeah. No,
when I found the hiking, now I look forward to meetings in Las Vegas because I can get out of town.
There you go. Well, that's going to do it. I appreciate you being on today, Ron. It's been insightful, and always enjoy visiting with you. I appreciate you taking the opportunity out of your day. I know you have a board meeting today, and tell everybody I said hi, and hopefully it'll be a good, productive board meeting. Looking forward to 2025, and seeing where we can go in the profession, and just appreciate all that you do. So just to remind everybody, make sure you like and share these podcasts with your friends. Listen to these on all of the sites. I don't know where we're putting them on. I think Podbean, Spotify, YouTube. Sarah at MPA has been phenomenal at trying to help me organize all this stuff. I was trying to have her on today, but I guess she's sick. So hopefully she'll get to feeling better. But I appreciate everybody for listening. And until next time, we'll talk to you later.